Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Adrift, Ghost at the Gallows, out August 18th on Century Media Records. The album has 8 tracks, 46 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. They are an American heavy metal band. And for the design of this record, they put together an album that has a path. But like any other path, with every step that you take, the scenery around you changes, and even the path itself at times morphs. And this album is exactly like that, almost becoming a pure biography of the history of the band. From where they were, to where they are, to where they're heading. This album gives you all of that, and you see that from song to song, and see that develop within the songs, allowing for a very dynamic, fluid, and really engaging experience. A lot more than what I had hoped for coming in. I was expecting the album with 8 songs, 46 minutes, to be very compact, to have a lot of similarities, definitely not be as fluid as this record is. So great design for a great album. An album that also has great sound behind it. But that sound doesn't stay consistent in its output from the first to the last. If you're going to have a path, and that path is kind of biographical in terms of what it represents from the band's standpoint of everything that they've done, you have to also be able to move and merge and grow the sound experience from track to track. More clear, more darker, more atmospheric, more doomier, more classic heavy metal. All of these elements have different characteristics. All of these elements have different textures. And I think you're going to find a lot of different changes in that texture of sound from song to song, without losing track of what the DNA of the band is all about. That's what allows this record to work, because on one hand you're seeing the different faces of Adrift, but on the other hand they're all part of the DNA of the band. They're all part of who Adrift is. So that sound experience, that change in sound experience from track to track, it's definitely something that I wasn't expecting, something that I feel that it's pretty new to them, and also added incredible value to how you're going to take the most, not just out of the overall record experience, but the individual songs as well. If you look at the opening track, Give Her to the River, for example, how atmospheric that track is, with sound effects that really paint a vivid picture of what the lyrical content is all about. And then moving into songs that are a lot heavier, more driven, with more classic heavy metal elements to them, not as doomier, not as darker, not as rigid. And then you add the ability to mix in acoustic guitar elements that give you enough pockets for you to breathe and for the album to breathe itself, becoming the pillars, the cornerstones of the overall design, but also of the sound experience as well. On an album that's extremely guitar centric. Not that this is new, or it shouldn't be new for fans of Adrift, but this album, I think it puts even more focus on how heavily dependent on the guitar sound, on the riffs, on the melodies this band is. This album is a clinic from that point of view. From the doomier riffs to the more classic heavy metal riffs, the sound experience, the growth, the experience, the atmosphere that comes from those riffs is outstanding. The only element that always feels like it jumps out of the tracks guitar-wise are the solos. Everything else feels very compact, it feels very layered in the overall song design and in the overall song structure. But the solos always feel extra brighter. They have a different sound to them, they have a different production behind them, and that allows them to jump off the pages and become almost the focus within the tracks themselves, putting a little bit more of attention on how bright, on how dynamic, on how engaging they are. But overall, the guitar performance throughout this album is definitely the calling card of the album itself, and you see the diversity of the band represented in that guitar sound and in that execution. The drums are there more to pack the experience and also to add heaviness. The heavier tracks on this album heavily depend on that drum sound to jump from the back seat into the passenger seat and play more of a coordinated role with the guitar sound and pushing that heaviness forward, becoming a little bit more intense, not necessarily more aggressive, but definitely giving a little bit more of a sense of intensity to how the songs come across. So the drums have movement as well as the guitars do, but the guitars have versatility to them. The drums have more a sense of parallel movement, either being in the back, making the sound feel more cohesive, or moving into the front and working in parallel in order to not only give that cohesive nature to the sound, but also creating a sense of volume and heaviness. The vocals are super warm on this album, matching the essence of every single song. The doomier tracks, the vocals go a little bit deeper. The songs that have more of that energy, that forward motion, that have more heaviness to them, the vocals match that essence as well. Not sitting always in the same spot, or not even having the same approach on every single track. As diverse as the album is in terms of the influences of the tracks, so are the vocal performance and how the vocals are mixed within the track itself. Some using some reverb, some of them a little bit deeper in the mix, some a little bit more in the forefront. It's all adjusting on the fly as you go along through this path that this album puts forward. And because of this movement in sound and this movement in vocals, that's why I say this is a very biographical sounding record. It really gives you the full essence of what this band has been up to this point, while still opening some doors into some avenues that they can go as it comes to the future. Overall, very interesting record, an album that has unique characteristics to it and definitely stands out as far as the overall discography of the band is concerned. As far as favorite songs goes, I want to start off with the opening track, Give Her to the River. Like I said earlier, the atmospheric sounds on this track, the sounds of the river, the noise of the birds, you can almost hear the wind hitting the leaves, but it has this river feel to it as it opens, and that paints a vivid picture and allows the song to be a lot more impactful in terms of the lyrical content, but also the sound that it carries. It makes for a very warm experience all around. And then the song finishes with that same river. So it's once the story is told, you're left in the same place as you were before the story started to unfold. The sense of going full circle is really interesting. This is the only track that offers that sort of atmospheric intro and atmospheric outro, and it starts right off the bat as the opening song of the album, having these sort of characteristics. Using backing vocals really helps this track as well, because it gives it volume, not just when you have volume in the sound, but it also gives you volume vocally. And then the solo section is face melting, as they are throughout this entire record. The solos on this album are definitely something to write home about. Next you have Hangman's Revenge. This is a big sounding track, galloping song. That's the best way to describe it. I think the Hangman's Revenge, I think he was a cowboy, because this song has that galloping riff, that galloping sound. The drums help that essence, tying in with the guitars, creating thickness, creating heaviness, still allowing the guitars to be the ones pulling the charge, to be the ones up front, but the guitars are not that, the drums are not that far back from them, so you have a little bit more of a robust sound experience all around. The chorus is super hooky. It slows down the song, but it doesn't bring it to a screeching halt, which is really important because the verses are really pedal to the metal and you want to keep that galloping momentum. So maybe the chorus allows you to trot, not gallop, but that's about it. It stays very, very similar, so there's not a huge jolt as it moves from one into the next. Another great solo section, really completing. The solo section on this track really gives you an essence of how guitar-centric not just the whole album is, but how this song really depends on that guitar sound and all of the different intricate elements that comes from it. I love the overall darkness that this track also brings, even though it's a little bit heavier and not necessarily a doomy track. Last, but definitely not least, but actually the last song on the record, Ghost at the Gallows. This is an epic song, almost 8 minutes long. It doesn't feel like 8 minutes because it's a song that's really well constructed, has epic riffage all over it. It starts off a little bit more doomier, and then it starts to build up and it becomes more of a classic heavy metal track, still with some underlining doom elements. The marriage between those two works really well on this song. The vocals have a different experience than any other track on this album. They use a little bit more reverb on this song, something that you don't see throughout the entire record, and then you're going to see that experience. So when you look at the opening track and you look at the closing track, the opening track having those atmospheric river sound elements at the beginning and end, something unique to that song, and then this track has the uniqueness of how the vocals are coming across that really sets it apart outside of obviously the overall length. Now the acoustic guitar bridge that builds into this melancholic experience and the vocals come in matching that same melancholy allows the track to have this pocket that makes it more approachable. It makes it more digestible. When you look at an 8-minute song, you have to keep the listener engaged. that piece there definitely engages the listener because it changes the dynamic, it changes the DNA of how the track sounds, of how the track feels, before bringing it back with a very powerful dark riff that becomes the exclamation mark as the song tails in towards the end. Talk about a horseman before a cowboy. This song has that riding towards the sunset right as the song ends. That sound, that feel, that energy really comes forward as the song ends, as the album comes to a closure. This is it, Spirit Adrift, Ghost at the Gallows, out August 18th on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those, getting back to you. Take care, guys.